For the first time in our Tower of God cut content series, we actually have full cutscenes to discuss. There was a pretty intense fight scene from the third round of the Crown game that the anime just didn't include. Not only that, but because the anime skimmed on a lot of the action, plenty of details regarding new weapons, techniques, or just the tower in general weren't made clear. Take Kun's speed in the third round, for example. This was a direct result of him emptying his bag of the regulars inside. Because he no longer had to carry around the weight of 3 people in a single hand, he was able to move much more quickly. So let's take a look at more things like that and see exactly what was skipped in episode 4 and 5. But first, this video is sponsored by Gamigo. If you're looking for a new outlet to spend your free time on, then check out Gamigo.net to explore an extensive catalog of free games, one of which is Aura Kingdom, a free-to-play anime-styled MMORPG with numerous PvE and PvP elements. With your uniquely customized character, you can immerse yourself within this beautifully crafted fantasy world and engaging storyline through various quests and dungeons. And it's a world that's constantly expanding through new patch updates, the most recent of which brought us 2 new maps to explore, 2 new dungeons to adventure, and 3 new quests to complete, all of which contain new mysteries, treasures, and rewards, including some pretty awesome looking new weapons. Personally, I'm most looking forward to checking out the dungeons and fighting all the new monsters inside. So if you're interested in doing the same and exploring the vast world of Aura Kingdom, then use the link in the description to register for free and start playing today. Episode 4, The Green April, covering chapter 17 to chapter 21 of the webtoon. Let's start things off at the beginning of the second round. As 2 new teams entered the arena, Hats found himself up against another swordsman. It's here that this swordsman mentions a key piece of information about the upper floors. According to him, swords weren't quite the optimal weapon to use in the tower. If you were planning to climb, then you had to know how to deal with increasingly dense areas of Shinsu. These were high viscosity areas that made it difficult to use swords with high friction surfaces. What this meant was that katanas or longswords, or basically any sword with a high surface area, was practically non-existent in the upper levels. Instead, it was much more common to see needles or spears used. So this could have been the last time that they got to use their swords in a real fight. And as much as Hats's opponent wanted to fight fair, gaining the crown was much more important. Now, the anime doesn't quite explain the technique that Hats uses to defend himself. It's a combination of offense and defense involving both his swords. The sword with the red hilt is used for the technique Highest Flying Sword. Almost always he will start a fight by throwing this sword into the air first. He'll then have it move on its own to attack or block depending on the situation. The sword with the blue hilt is used for the technique Lowest Flying Sword. Hats chooses to wield this one in his hand, and every strike that he makes with it emits a powerful shockwave. Together they formed a technique that easily defeated the team that he was up against, giving him ample time to save Shibusu and take on Serena's team next. But when Hats saw that Serena and Ho were fighting for their lives while Laure slept in the back, you could say that Hats felt a little bit angry. To him, Laure seemed like scum who absolutely didn't deserve to be on the test floor. He honestly felt that Head-On made a mistake with the selection process. So, in order to correct that mistake, Hats drew his highest flying sword and sent it right over to where Laure slept. Normally, Hats was someone who was against killing, but he always made an exception when it came to those he considered scum. And right now, Laure was exactly that. Unless he wanted to die, then he needed to get up now and move. But this was the exact moment that Laure had been waiting for. His plan of isolating Anak all while stalling the round had worked. Now he had the opportunity to target Anak without any third-party interference. Unlike in the anime, it looked as if Anak took on the entirety of the second blast. She had visibly taken a decent amount of damage, but not enough to take her out of the fight. While this did make her angry, what was more infuriating was the fact that the trap that she was setting was ruined. You see, Anak was baiting herself in hopes that someone else would challenge her, but instead all she got was Laure. It's only after this that Laure realized that he'd made a terrible mistake. Anak had clearly sat herself in the throne for a reason. That much was painfully clear now. So as everyone looked in awe at Anak's power, Lidodo wasn't nearly as impressed. In fact, he was rather disappointed because he was hoping that Anak would remind him of the first time that he met Yuri. Instead, all he saw was the temper tantrum of a spoiled brat. Even so, the fact remained that the Green April was a very powerful weapon. Upon seeing it, couldn't really believe that it was now impossible to win the game. There was just no way that they could possibly go up against an ignition weapon, let alone one from the 13-month series. It's after this ignition that the Black March started to act a bit weird, causing Anak to divert her attention towards Bam. You see, weapons from the 13-month series begin to resonate when they're close to each other. That's how Anak was able to notice the Black March all the way from the throne. Kun was slowly piecing all of this together, but something was still off. Something about Anak having the Green April just didn't seem right. Kun always was a perceptive individual, so it's not surprising that he was able to immediately notice the odd nature of Anak's character. Now, after Anak breaks into Bam's room, there's a line that she says which foreshadows her upcoming development. As Bam refused to hand over the Black March, Anak recalled a phrase that her mom would always say: "The ones who fail to know their place die young." This is a very significant line considering what happened to Anak's mother, something that I'm sure you'll realize once you watch episode 6. Anyway, Ledodo had seen enough, and he quickly stepped in to break things up. But before Anak left, she didn't just simply make a bet. What she did was request a change to the very rules of the game that they were playing. You see, one of the elements of the tests was that it was possible to change the rules if the test administrator agreed to it. So rather than Anak's proposal just being a simple bet, it turned into an additional game set up within the Crown game, all of which was approved by Ledodo. Accepting this game was Bam's safest option, as winning meant that he would have guaranteed protection from Anak afterward. But even with that, Anak still saw Bam's initial hesitation to accept her terms. She believed that it was because Bam had weak teammates, and she was very clear in stating that that's what she thought. Of course, Kun and Rak didn't take being called weak very lightly. In fact, it only motivated them to want to prove Anak wrong. So Kun's initial response was that as a main character, he was just biding his time, letting all the extras play their games until it was time for his arrival. On the other hand, Rak had something more simple to say. The game without him meant nothing. So, on Bam's behalf, they accepted the game's new rules. This whole affair was getting a little bit exciting now. Even Ledodo started to feel that this Crown game was shaping up to be the best one in history. So, with the third round about to begin, here's where things start to get a lot different. As we saw, every team participating knew that getting the crown first was the key to victory. Each team had a member who believed that they could be the fastest, but none could quite keep up with Kun, who got there before anyone was even able to react. It was an inhuman level of speed that actually came from his own power. In the previous tests, Kun wouldn't have been able to move that fast. This was because he was carrying the weight of more than 3 people the entire time. Only after he let those people out of his bag was he able to move without constraint. So yeah, this entire time Kun was carrying around the weight of 3 people in a single hand. It's a level of power that was actually very common for all the children of the 10 great families. Anyway, after being the first to retrieve the crown, he then tried to get the other teams to fight each other for it. Although that strategy did in fact work in the anime, it's not really what happened in the webtoon. After throwing the crown, Kun went on to say that only the person who retrieved it would be allowed to fight him for his spot on the throne. It was a level of cockiness that caused the other teams to form an alliance against him. Rather than fight amongst themselves, they instead decided to cooperate with each other and fight Kun. Only after Kun was dead would they then go for the crown. So, because this agreement wasn't made in the anime, there was a lot less focus on the fights of the third round. In fact, a pretty lengthy fight sequence involving Kun, Rak, and Bam didn't make it to the anime. It started with Katana attempting to attack Kun, but Kun didn't just simply block this attack. He used his bag to swallow Catan whole and completely remove him from the fight. It was then and there that everyone took notice as to just how powerful and potentially expensive Kun's bag was, especially the girl who was always with the knight. She seemed especially interested in the value of it. Now, with 3 teams completely focused on Kun, Rak, and Bam, this whole situation should have been a lot more hectic. We got to see all sorts of weapons and attacks be used on them, and Bam wasn't nearly as safe as the anime made it seem. One person tried to attack him with a gun that shot a remote-controlled marble. Another tried to attack Kun with what's called a compression weapon. These were weapons where the true size of it was compressed into a smaller form, all while keeping the same mass, allowing it to have the same impact as if it was in its full-sized form. Even for someone like Kun, it posed quite the threat, so it became something that he needed to avoid. Meanwhile, Rak had just been surrounded on all sides. As he was about to get attacked from 3 different angles, Kun repositioned himself in a way that directed his enemy's strike towards another. This caused Alexei to get hit by the full force of the compression weapon. Kun wasn't yet in the clear though. He was still fighting against Palgian, a wielder of a longer katana-type sword. Because Kun had only ever pulled out a small knife, Palgian felt that he had a range advantage. This left an opening for Kun to strike with a longer version of his knife, taking out the last of the close-range fighters. However, many of the ranged ones were still planning their attack. The Shinsu user, sniper, and compression weapon holder all felt that Bam was the easiest target. So, as they all launched an attack aimed directly at Bam, something weird happened midway. Every single one of them, including the bullet that was about to hit him, stopped completely. From an outsider's perspective, it's almost as if some mysterious force was protecting Bam. Whatever it was, the fact that their opponents were now in a frozen state gave Kun and Rak the opportunity to take them out. This left only Chungchung. She was trying to use her small size to discreetly grab the crown and make her way to the throne. But that's when Kun revealed that the crown was just a fake. His plan of using the fake crown to turn the enemy's attention away from Bam was a complete success. Sure, it came with the help of some mysterious force, but really all that mattered was the outcome. Now, the fourth round ended just as quickly as the third, as Kun had used the team that he snuck in with to help him win. If you remember last cut content, when Kun went to the bathroom, that was the moment that he used to take the other 3 regulars out of his bag. So now we bring ourselves to the final round. 4 teams entered, but as soon as the round started, only 2 of them were left standing. The mysterious masked woman took all of them out. She then easily evaded Rak and went straight for Bam. Kun was unable to react because he was busy dealing with another regular, so the woman was able to confront Bam uncontested. But rather than forcibly take the crown from the beginning, for some reason she first requested that he hand it over. This gave Endorsi enough time to intervene, but not with her needle though. Instead she fought with what's known as her lapel pins. These were weapons that she wore on her dress that could expand and compress. In this case, she expanded them into shields that would protect Bam, and she would continue to use them in combination with these tiny needle-like projectiles. Not once did she have to bring out her real needle. Endorsi fought this mysterious challenger without ever needing to go on the offensive. She looked as if she was simply playing, evading every attack as if they were coming from a child. On the other hand, Kun and Rak weren't having such an easy time. Lucky for them, they had the outsider team to help. So as Anak watched the situation unfold, she began to worry that things might actually go against how she expected. You see, she made the bet with Bam believing that the outsider team would win the game in the 5th round. There was no way that they heard about the additional rule that Ledodo added, and there was no logical reason for them not to win the game. So for them to come in and do the exact opposite of what Anak planned, well, that was a bit frustrating for her. Meanwhile, this whole time, Bam was wondering whether the girl standing in front of him was actually Rachel or not. To him, something about her teaming up with this giant monster just didn't seem right. He could never imagine a situation where Rachel would befriend this thing. So perhaps it wasn't Rachel at all. It was that lingering doubt that kept him playing the game at all. Because he wasn't 100% sure that this girl was in fact Rachel, then he couldn't intentionally lose the game just yet. But if she was, then this game was pointless. So when Rachel's identity was finally revealed, that was the point where the game didn't matter anymore. Right now, the only thing that mattered was to protect Rachel. It's here that Bam would do something that would shock even the administrator. Not a single person knew what happened. The only thing that everyone saw was a single blast of Shinsu. The thing is, this Shinsu didn't move as if it was being manipulated. No, it looked more as if it moved of its own volition, almost as if it was protecting Bam. Whatever it was, it went against the very laws of the tower. Now, Bam didn't get up after this. He doesn't lose control and the Black March doesn't put him to sleep. All that was just original stuff that was added to the anime. Instead, we skip to a scene with Yuri. Yet again, we find a lot of the stuff involving her and her team to be cut out. The scene begins with her complaining to Evan about how it was taking way too long to get to Evankel's floor. What started out as 2 roads shifted to 3 and now became 5. The path was just getting longer. She felt that she needed a light bearer now more than ever. Anyway, Yuri had gathered so many rankers that it looked as if she was getting ready to go to war with Evankel. I mean, that's what Kuriden actually thought was going on. But according to Evan, Evankel's rank was so high that even the idea of opposing her was foolish. That's when Mrs. Ice Strawberry and her partner come back from scouting the paths. She mentioned how the 3rd road looked the fastest. but unfortunately part of the path was a white steel eel nesting ground. Normally, a group of eels wouldn't be a problem to take care of, but when they're nesting, they choose to place their babies in areas of highly dense shinsu. This was in order to protect them from other animals. Only people or creatures with steel-like armor would be capable of surviving that pressure of shinsu. Even top rankers like the ones in Yuri's team would find their movements heavily restricted. At first, Yuri didn't believe it, but Kurden bet his wing tree badge that no person would be able to move freely in that level of shinsu. This was quite the bold statement. Typically, the wing tree badge indicated that the wearer was one of the strongest people in the tower. So for someone like that to say that a task was too hard, then it must be true. But even then, Yuri still had her doubts. I mean, she herself was naturally highly resistant to the flow of shinsu. So very rarely had she ever experienced any kind of resistance with it. Not only that, but she was confident that she knew of a person who could very easily traverse that path. Someone they were going to meet on Evankel's floor. So with all that said, the only other path available was down the 5th road. Which brings us now to the end of the crown game and a little bit extra. As I'm sure you noticed, there was plenty of stuff to talk about this time, and there will definitely be even more next episode. So be sure to come back next week where we'll continue with episodes 6 and 7. Now, before I go, I'd like to thank Amigo once again for sponsoring this video. Don't forget, you can use the link in the description to download Aura Kingdom and start playing for free today. From the fast-paced battle mechanics to the numerous minigames, there's certainly plenty of engaging elements to keep you occupied, especially with the newest update featuring whole new maps and events. Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this type of anime content, then you already know what to do. So, until next time, ciao!